for the next few weeks, I'm going to talk about a subject that you may have not thought about recently. Really just talk about the pace of life. The pace of life. I felt like this was fitting as we're going into a season of life where the pace of life really picks up and there's a lot going on. There's a whole lot of things that have to get done on top of our normal programming, on top of our normal day-to-day life. And so I'm going to take a few weeks and rally around this topic. And as I jump into this today, I'm reminded of a story about, there's a guy named John Ortberg who is a pastor and an author, a theologian. And before he was what he is today, maybe some of you have heard that name or read a book by him, there's this story that is told about him reaching out to his mentor, who is Dallas Willard. How would you like to have Dallas Willard as a mentor? Nobody knows who that is, but if you do, you'd be like, yes, please. Right? Some of you are shaking your head. Reaches out to his mentor because he was a lot earlier in his career, and he was given the opportunity to be on staff at one of the biggest churches in the country, in Chicago, outside of Chicago, called Willow Creek Church. And really just concerned about the effect that it was about to have on him in general. And if you've ever been part of a large church, it's a whole different animal. And sometimes for really good things and sometimes some shadow unhealth things. But I can relate to this situation because I've had a similar one in my life, not at this scale, but to where you go from serving in one capacity in a familiar place, and then everything is uprooted and you don't know how it's going to affect you and how you're going to change. And so as the story goes, he calls Dallas up and he asks this question. He says, what do I need to do to be spiritually healthy? Which is a pretty general question, isn't it? After a long pause, which is pretty normal for him, I've heard, he said, you must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. So he writes those words down, waits for another second and said, okay, that's a good start. What else? And Dallas responds and says, there is nothing else. Hurry is the great enemy of the spiritual life in our day. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. And so that's what I'm calling this series. This is based off of a book called the same title, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I know that's a mouthful, but this book changed my life. And I don't know how you feel about your pastor taking a book and using it as the guide to a sermon series, but I don't think I can do much better. Sometimes you come across content that you're just like, wow, this guy is gifted in grace to give a message that we need to hear in a way that is easily accessible. And so I'm going to take a second and just give this book away if somebody wants it. It's a hard copy. It's the good version. Anybody willing to read this? Come up and get it. Not all at once. They feel like we're wearing the same shirt, but a different color, man. When you take family picture later. But for the next few weeks, I'm going to go through this. And this statement may not be one of those that you kind of go, what? Because this topic of hurry doesn't seem like something that we really have to be concerned about. Like if I asked you, what is the greatest enemy to your spiritual health, you can come up with a list of things, and that probably would not make the list. You say, well, the woke ideology and the evil all around us and the Democrats or the Republicans or however you feel about it. You can come up with a lot of answers to what is the enemy that is against your spiritual development and your spiritual health. But there's something to this, and I hope that you'll give me a chance to line that out for you so you'll see what I'm talking about. But, in our culture, it's just built in, this thing of hurry, right? We talk about it in different ways, though, don't we? You never are going to watch a social media influencer, somebody on YouTube or whatever, telling you about, you need to slow down, you need to do less. It's always the opposite in it. You need to grind. I hear Steve Jobs, I think it was, maybe it was Elon Musk that said, take your 10-year goals and do them in the next 6 months. That sounds like stuff people say today, and you listen to that and you go, well, maybe that's possible, but what is the cost of something like that? It's just kind of baked into our culture that we live at a certain speed and a certain pace, don't we? That we're all about the grind. In essence, if you're busy, it's kind of a status symbol. And some of you, I will talk to you and say, how's it going? You can say, I'm busy. Or, how's life treating? It's good, but I'm busy. We just kind of use this language and it sneaks into our vocabulary. And there's a lot to that I think is really stealing pieces of our lives. A few years ago, it was about 2021, 2022, I came to a point in my life where I was getting really close to being burned out. In this season of my life, I had planted a church. I was running a construction company. I had 2 kids, an old house I was trying to remodel, and on and on and on and on and on. And it was one of those times when I thought, at some point, I'm going to have a heart attack. At some point, if I keep living at this speed of life, it's going to kill me or end my marriage or something is going to happen. And it was in that time that I reached out to somebody and was just kind of like, man, here's what I'm going through. It doesn't seem like any of this stuff is negotiable, that I have to do this and I have to do that. And we started this and we're committed to that thing, but I can't keep up with it all. And somebody recommended a book to me called Emotionally Healthy Spiritualities by Pete Scazzaro. And really another one of those life-changing books. And really what it drilled down on was this practice of Sabbath. Anybody heard of Sabbath? When we say Sabbath, it seems like old speak for Sunday, which it is in some regards. But this principle of Sabbath, and I'm going to give a whole week to studying the Sabbath, but it really opened my eyes to some unhealthy trends in my life that just seemed normal. And maybe you can relate to that. And then came into my life that book that I just gave away that we're doing this series over. And those two things together really, I gained a new awareness about how important what I'm talking to you today, how important this idea is. And so my hope is that I can share with you my journey and give you some clarity on why this is such an important thing in your life. And you would say, well, I'm retired. Maybe you don't need this message at all. Just pray in the Holy Spirit and cheer other people on, okay? Maybe you've already figured out everything I'm about to say. Maybe this isn't for you, and that's completely fine. But there are a lot of us that so desperately need to catch a break, that need to catch a healthy rhythm and pace of life. And so there are 2 big ideas in this series I want to present to you. The first one is, what's normal? And that's tiny print, I know, I'm sorry. What's normal isn't necessarily healthy. There are plenty of things that are normal, but are not healthy. And I think we live in a moment where so much is normal that is unhealthy, beyond this topic I'm talking about right now. But it is very normal for us to fill every second of every day with something to do. That just to pay the bills anymore, you have to be at work and be trying to do this thing. And if you don't have a side hustle, what are you doing? Who are you? What's wrong with you? That's normal. But it may not be the wisest way to live your life. And then the second thing, hurry is the biggest threat to our spiritual growth. And that one's probably going to take you a little time to catch on to, but my hope is that you do. It might not be the most obvious choice, like this conversation I told you about with Dallas Willard and John Ortberg. But when we think about how the enemy defeats us, it's not this devil with a pitchfork who's obvious and doing all these things that we picture kind of in a cartoonish character. He's much more subtle than that, isn't he? That he uses good things to distract us from the best things. That he uses things that are kind of benign, kind of okay, whatever, to take the place of what God is trying to do in our lives sometimes. He's so much smarter than we give him credit for. And I hate even saying that, but you need to be aware of the enemy that is against all of us. And today you're more likely to run into the devil by getting an alert on your phone while you're trying to study your Bible, or finding yourself in the middle of an 8-hour Netflix binge and feeding your dopamine addiction with your thumbs or whatever the thing is, or finding yourself at the office another Saturday morning, or going to that kid's soccer game, the doubleheader on Sunday, and you kind of go, man, we used to not do this Sunday game thing. What's the deal? Why have we filled our lives and allowed this to be the normal practice? He's very sneaky the way that he infiltrates and influences us, not in outright ways that would lead us straight down the pit of hell, but slowly take away our focus, our presence of mind, and our ability to be spiritually healthy and spiritually present. I love this quote by Corrie ten Boom that really sums up what I'm trying to say. Seems like somebody else can always say it better than I can, right? She says this: if the devil can't make you sin, he'll make you busy. It's a strange quote, but I think she's right. That there are plenty of people that would say, well, I've had a long week, so I'm not going to come to church. And to you, maybe you're like, well, who cares? I can read my Bible at home. I can do whatever. There is something about Christ-centered community in whatever form it takes that is of the utmost importance in our lives. And oftentimes, not to be the soapbox preacher that says people don't come to Sunday school anymore or come to church as much as they do, it's lost its importance because there are other things that have elbowed their way in above and beyond that. And I hope that you hear that and go, ugh, maybe there is something to that. There's truth that in both of these things, sin and busyness, they have the same effect on our lives. They cut off your connection to God, to other people, and even to your own soul. And the truth is that our greatest competitor to discipleship is really just time. This is why you think things like this. When this season slows down, I'm going to do this thing. When I retire, I make jokes about that sometimes. I say, when I retire, I'm going to learn Greek and Hebrew and be a real Bible scholar, that kind of stuff. If it's really important to me, I'd be doing it right now. And, you can throw rocks at me for that, I guess. But we all have this mentality that sometime in the future, it's going to let up, right? Just 2 more weeks and things will slow down. That's kind of the joke. And you keep living those 2 weeks over and over and over again until you die. Or you stop one point and go, man, I got to stop this. Somehow, some way, I've got to figure out how to not keep living those 2 weeks that I keep lying to myself about into the future. After this, it's going to slow down. It never slows down. I'm too busy. You're too busy. And all of us are busy. And granted, there's a healthy kind of busy, isn't there? When your life is full of things that matter and you have seasons where you're busy, that's a good thing. By that definition, I think we say that Jesus Christ himself was busy in some regards. But something happens. The problem isn't that you have a lot to do. It's when you have so much to do that the only way to keep up with the pace that you have is to lose some sleep, is to do things quickly, is to just keep and living at a pace that is chipping away at your soul. Here's another quote by Mr. Ronald Rolheiser, who I don't know who this guy is, but I love the quote. I think he's a Catholic. Hopefully that didn't offend you too much. He says this: "Today a number of historical circumstances are blindly flowing together and accidentally conspiring." Are you tracking with this? A lot of stuff is coming into play at the right time, and this is the effect. To produce a climate within which it is difficult not just to think about God or pray, but simply to have in any interior depth whatsoever. Maybe you can relate. He goes on and says, "We are distracting ourselves into spiritual oblivion. Pathological business." Pathological, that's a big word that, look it up. It's a scary thing. Pathological busyness, distraction, and restlessness are major blocks today within our spiritual lives. This is normal, but it's not healthy. This is what is expected, but it's not working. And the truth is, it hasn't always been this way. And maybe some of you that are a little up in age can remember a time when it just seemed like things were slower. I'm 43, and I feel like I remember a time when things were slower. It was like before the iPhone, the technology rollout, it was like you had a little bit of time to catch your breath and relate to it and kind of learn the new thing. And now it's like, how in the world do I go and delete the picture now from Facebook? Or why is it that I can't find it? It used to be here. You know that feeling, don't you? It just seems like everything is operating at such a breakneck speed that you can't keep up with what's going on. And maybe if you're my age, you remember a time when, every spare moment that you had, you didn't pull out your phone and go, "Oh, I wonder what's going on." Maybe you remember a time when you would go somewhere and wait. Well, that was a different time, wasn't it? You weren't in line doing this thing right here, In fact, if you're not doing this and you're in line, people will look at you like, "What is wrong with you? What's going on?" That there was a time when things weren't like they were now. It hasn't always been this way. I want to give you a brief sort of the history of speed, if you will. That's what I'm calling it. Because this is helpful. I think this will be helpful to get a grasp on how much things have changed over the course of the last 1,000 years or so. But in 200 BC, which was a long time ago, I know, it started off probably what really led us into this moment that we're in now. And this was the moment the sundial was put into play, the sundial. And you don't think about sundials often, probably, do you? I'd like to have one in my yard. I think they're cool, like as a garden piece, you know. But the sundial really changed the way that we lived our lives. There's a Roman playwright, Plautus, that says this. It says, "The gods confound the man who first found out how to distinguish hours. Confound him too, who in this place set up Sunday's dial to cut and hack my days so wretchedly into small portions." Before this, people didn't think in terms like we do. Even, we don't use a sundial, obviously, but we think in terms of hours and half hours and minutes. Before that, it was a completely different life that people lived. In 1370, the first public clock tower was erected in Germany. Not the clock on your watch, on your wrist, but people just had one clock tower in town, and it changed the way that they lived. It changed the way that they did everything. And as you see time progress, more and more and more, everything changes. Before that, you went to bed with the moon and got up with the sun. Some of you still do that. I hope you do. It's good. It's good practice, isn't it? The days were long and busy in the summer and short and slow in the winter. I hate this time of year, man. When we get daylight savings time and it gets dark at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that's the worst time of the year, isn't it? You're like, what is going on? There was a time when people just adjusted their lives to that and they just lived between those hours. Not anymore, though, huh? Then the clock changed all that. It created artificial time. The slog of 9 to 5 year round. So it wasn't long days in the summer and short in the winter, but consistently. And still to this day, some of you are a little angry when you get off work at 5 o'clock and it's dark outside already. Anybody else? Like, what is this about? This isn't fair. We stopped listening to our bodies and started listening to alarm clocks. Ugh. We became more efficient, but also less human. When the sun set our rhythm of work and rest, it did so under the control of God, but the clock is under the control of the employer, a far more demanding master. And then in 1879, we get the light bulb. That wasn't that long ago, if you think about it, really. I mean, it was, but in the grand scheme of things, on the timeline, it wasn't really that long ago. In 1879, Edison invented the light bulb. Get this, before that, the average person slept 11 hours a night. Can you imagine sleeping 11 hours a night? What do you get these days? What's your average sleep every night? 4? Whew. I don't know how you're here right now. I think the average now is something like 7 hours a night. Isn't that crazy to think about? How much has changed in that little amount of time? In the modern day, we see more and more things that fall into a category I would call labor-saving devices. In essence, everything is just more efficient. We know this to be true, and there's a lot about that to be celebrated, but there's a lot that can go wrong as well. In one famous committee, a Senate committee in 1967, also not that long ago, was told that by 1985, the average American would only work 22 hours a week for 27 months out of the year.
Okay, I found this on the web. For the average would only work 22 hours a week. Check it out.
Siri, cut it out. Sorry about that. Case in point, right? It's intrusive. You know what's funny about this? This is 1967. They're talking about by 1985. I hear a lot of statements like this in regards to AI recently. Have you? Where people say, the good thing, if they're positive about AI technology, it's like, it will take all the things that you don't want to do and it will make your workload so much easier. You will have so much leisure time. How many of you listen to that and go, I've been down this road before? It seems like this is a reoccurring pattern in our lives, isn't it? Where we get sold this bill of goods of, hey, this is going to make your life easier. You're going to have more time. You're going to be less of a slave to time. And somehow we keep finding ourselves in worse shape. The average American works almost 4 more weeks a year than they did in 1979, just to be clear there. And maybe you're old enough to remember blue laws. Anybody remember that? Kind of speaking to Sundays and Sabbath. It's a uniqueness today when some business is closed on Sunday. When I say closed on Sunday, you think about Kanye West or Yee or whatever he's going by these days, and like Chick-fil-A. And they're like the only ones, besides a few other local people, that try to honor, giving families an opportunity not to have to work on Sunday. There was a time when that was just baked into what we do. That if something was open, think when 7-Eleven came into town, maybe you're old enough to remember that, I'm not, but I've heard. That it felt strange, it was odd, and now it's not. And then I think the most significant thing to happen in history, and time will tell to this, in 2007, something significant happened. Do anybody know what it is? Is it hot in here too? Are you guys falling asleep? I'm trying to keep you engaged with what we're talking about. Tell you to settle down? In 2007, we got this thing called the iPhone. Remember that? I didn't get one then because I didn't have enough money, because it was a ton of money then, and it's still more now. But once I got one, I've never had any other phone and been happy with it. Sorry, Android people. I mean, you're second-class citizens, and we love you. It's okay, but there's nothing. When I see that green text message bubble, I think less of you. I'll be honest. I'm kidding, kind of. But when we got to that point, something shifted and sped up, and all hell broke loose, it seemed like. And it wasn't just that. If you remember, in 2007 is when they opened up Facebook to everybody. I was in college before that, and I got one like a few years before, so I was kind of early adopter. But when everybody and their grandma had a Facebook in 2007, it was different, wasn't it? Alongside of that was when Twitter, now X, became its own thing. All these things happened around the same time. And it seems like since that point, it's like somebody hit a button and we went into another gear. We went into overdrive. We just keep picking up speed, moving faster and faster and faster toward this. And I would ask you this question: what does this new pace of life do to our souls? Listen, I'm not a Luddite. I don't think we should go back to not having clocks or phones or any of these things. Some of you will be like, yeah, I think we should. It's a good idea. Well, I understand that. I'm not against technological upgrades and the advantage of that. But at some point, we've got to steward it in such a way that it is not a hindrance to our souls. And because we're so used to this, because it's been around for long enough, we're just so used to things that we're allowing a lot to happen in our lives to the detriment of our spiritual walk. Hurry is actually a form of violence to our souls. I want you to think about that for a second. Whew. Some of you are like, that's good. And some of you are like, I don't know, man. That seems like a stretch. But think about all that happens when you're in a hurry. When I'm in a hurry, I'm not a very good version of me. I am mean. I'm honking like, get out of the way. I got stuff to do. You say, well, not me. Just if you're like me, you're a type A person, and you think that being on time is being late, and you're married to somebody that's the opposite, and you have kids, you know that when that goes awry, you are not very kind in the moment that you need to be patient. Or at least I'm not. Maybe you are. Maybe you can teach me how. But when you live a frantic pace, it does something to you, not just emotionally, not just in the way that you lash out in anger or anxiety or whatever the thing is, but it does something to your soul and to your spiritual being. This all sounds great, but what does it have to do with Jesus, Pastor? I think that Jesus has been offering an alternative to us for as long as he's been on the scene of time. That when he showed up over 2,000 years ago, he offered an alternative to this pace. And you all know this passage, but I'm going to be in Matthew chapter 11 today as we continue. I chose to pick out, or to read from the Message translation, or Message paraphrase. It's not a translation. Because I love the way that this comes across. And what Jesus is offering sounds incredible. I don't know about you, but if you read this from that perspective, you kind of go, sign me up. I want to know what you're talking about. Here's what he says. Are you tired? How many are tired? I'm tired. I feel like I'm always tired. Are you worn out? Yes. Burned down on religion? Whew. Don't say that too loud. Come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. Go back to this slide real quick. What a way to say this. You'll recover your life. Recover. What optics? I don't know about you, but I feel like I've spent so much time on things that aren't what I would choose to spend time on. I feel like I'm constantly having to catch up with the relationship I'm building with my children. That there is something to be recovered. That only through the grace of God that there are certain things that I feel like I need to invest more time, more energy into things that really matter. But it's hard to do that when there are other things vying for your attention. When you have to pay the bills and so you go to work. When you've made a commitment to this thing, or it's just expected of you to do X, Y, and Z, you'll recover your life. Then he says this, I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. And the last verse, this is verse 30, in the New King James, or I guess it's NIV I've pulled from, it says this. You know this verse. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. I guess I have the slide. But you know that. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. The way that that's put in front of us, it's kind of, it's telling. Jesus didn't show up and he said, are you tired? Yeah. You worn out? Yeah. You burned out on religion? Yeah, that's us. What do you got for us? Sell us a thing. He's not selling a pain-free existence. He's not selling a lack of any sort of burden to bear, but he is offering us a yoke. You can go, a yoke? Well, that's a weird thing to say. There's part of this that any rabbi would have a yoke, and that's language that you probably don't relate to where they would have just requirements for you to be their follower. But he's also speaking to the fact that he's not saying, if I come into your life, all your problems will be over, your burdens, all of them will be gone. He's doing something else, isn't he? He doesn't say, my yoke is non-existent and my burden is non-existent either, right? He says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And I think oftentimes we look to Jesus to give us an easier life, and sometimes that's true, and a lot of times it's not. There are times when you say yes to Jesus and immediately things get worse in your life in some way. The same is true. We talked about taking a moment just to reflect on how God blesses us. I meet people all the time that make a decision to be generous, to say, I'm going to strategically set aside a portion of my income and give it to this cause or the church or whatever. And it seems like the next week their car breaks down or something. It's a common occurrence that when we say yes to the Lordship of Jesus Christ, there are parts of our life that get heavier, that get harder, that seemingly get worse. He's not offering us a pain-free, easy existence in terms of the metrics that we have. He's offering to take the weight that we have and give us a new way to carry it. A new set of priorities. In essence, he's saying this, let's work together. I don't need you, but I'm going to work with you. It reminds me of those tandem bikes. You know what I'm talking about? A tandem axle bike. You get two people on one bike, or three people maybe if you're really crazy. Anybody ever rode one of those? They're terrible. Don't rent that thing. It's awful. It's like going in a canoe with your wife. You don't want to do it. Get kayaks, each of you. This is wisdom from your pastor. Can you imagine getting on that tandem bike, especially the back part of it, and trying to ride that dude by yourself? It'd be awful. Do not recommend. And we know that if two people get on one of those bikes, there's always going to be one person that's really pulling the thing, right? And maybe it's the person in the front for a little bit and the person in the back. And the same can be said. If the person in the back decides that they want to brake and the person in the front is trying to pedal, it's going to cause you some issues, isn't it? When Jesus offers this, I picture him saying, and bear with me, this is silly, I know, but I want you to get this image. Set down your old bike pick up my tandem bike. And I'm going to be in the front, you can be in the back. And with me, through the power of my Holy Spirit and me pumping my legs down the road, it's going to work out. That you can take on my yoke, my system of living. My burden is easy. It's healthy. It's light. In essence, he's saying, let's work together. And as Christians, I think we put a lot of focus on the ethics and the teachings of Jesus. When you read the Gospels, we read the New Testament. But we skip something incredibly important. That if we want to be followers of Jesus, that's language we use a lot in it. I'm going to follow. Who wants to follow Jesus? We're going to follow Jesus. It's not hard for us to think, I want to follow his principles and ethics and his teachings. But it's another thing to think about following the way and the life of Jesus Christ, how he modeled to live. But his way of life was that he was never in a hurry. In fact, most of the miracles that happened in Jesus' life were an interruption for some other thing he was going to. Have you noticed that? The best ones, in my opinion. They were an interruption. They weren't scheduled. They weren't planned. It wasn't efficient. He wasn't concerned with those things. In fact, when things got to where they were, what we'd say, oh, this is getting efficient. It's getting big. There's scale. We've got a system in place. He'd say, let's go. I'm going to go spend some time in the wilderness. I don't know, maybe 2 weeks. I don't know, maybe we should leave here and go somewhere where you are going to have a problem with the people that live there. Samaria, hello. He was constantly doing this kind of thing. He seemed like he was never concerned with efficiency or speed. There's no scripture that I can point to where Jesus was sprinting towards something, that he was in a hurry to do anything. Think about the account of Lazarus. People were angry with Jesus because he did not get there quick enough. Think about that. And we laugh at it because we know it doesn't matter if they've been dead for 2 years. He can say, dry bones come out of that grave. But we think like that. Here's what I want to leave you with. If you want to experience the life of Jesus, you have to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus. That's a strange thing to say because you're like grow a beard and wear sandals and no. You know what I mean. We are so wrapped up in what is normal to the detriment of what is healthy. You know, you remember those What Would Jesus Do bracelets? Remember those? They seem like they make a reoccurring entry to culture every couple of years or something. I don't know. It's like college kids find one somewhere like, oh, we're doing this again. When think in those terms, what would Jesus do? It's usually in his ethics and teachings. It's not usually in the way that he actually lived his day-to-day life. And I so wish that we had more information about it. We have plenty. But think about the life of Jesus. I'm going to end here in a minute. I'm going to ask our worship team to come up as they do. But think about the trajectory of Jesus' ministry. For all you that feel like you're late bloomers and life's passing you by and the stars aren't aligning on time. How old was Jesus when he began his ministry? Do you know? He wasn't young by any scope of the imagination, especially for the time that he lived in. The life expectancy was not what we have today. The Jesus, the Son of God, all man, all God, was not in a hurry to come to the point to do what he was created to do. Think about that. I could leave you with that. That would be something to ponder on for the rest of the week. That Jesus and his disciples didn't have this agenda on here we're going to be over here. They just did whatever he said to do. That he was not concerned with fame. He was not concerned with influence. What was his concern? Loving people wherever he was. And there were times when that was probably pretty hard to do because he was worn out with healing people. They would flock to him. He'd have to go into hiding. I think so many times we are so concerned with being normal that we miss out on what God is trying to call us to. I don't know if you know this, but if you never did anything else in your life, you never accomplished anything else in your life, by the world's standards, you were a complete and utter failure, God would not be sorry that he made you. It would not change the way he feels about you one iota. There is nothing you can do to earn his love, to impress him in that way. But for whatever reason, we are so wrapped up in a bunch of other things, aren't we? Even as it relates to church, sometimes I have to repent because, there are times when I am so focused on what's the budget, how many people showed up this week, what's the metric that I can count at the expense of just loving people. Like that's what we're called to do. Just to love people, to be present. You know how expensive it is for me to just be present with somebody? Maybe you can relate to this. To not be thinking about the next thing I have to do, to not be jonesing for my phone, to not be worried about how I'm coming across, all these things, just to be in the moment with somebody is such a valuable thing that it's never on our minds. There's this beautiful moment where Jesus, his disciples are kind of frustrated with him. And he's playing with little kids. And the picture we see in our minds of Jesus interacting with these kids is like from a storybook Bible. He's sitting on an outcropping of rocks and it's, tan white behind him. Everything's perfect and prim and proper. He's got a kid on his knee. I think really he was probably on his hands and knees in the dust just playing with these kids, just playing with kids like you do. And his disciples are in a moment they're embarrassed of their rabbi, that they have given up everything to follow this guy who's creating a cloud of dust, doing things that are looked down upon in their culture. Not even the same way here. If I started doing that, you might kind of look at me like, what are you doing, man? It's such a beautiful picture of who Jesus is and the way that he lived his life. His disciples, on and on and on, they were always a force trying to change direction. Remember the moment where Jesus says to Peter, what does he say? He has this moment with Peter where Peter really gets it. And then he says to him, get behind me, Satan, just a few verses later. Because they were constantly trying to impose their normal upon Jesus as healthy. And not much has changed in our lives, has it? I want to end like this. Maybe you're not bought into this idea. You're like, I'm not coming next week. This sounds terrible. I'll see you back after when we start talking about Christmas stuff. That's fine. But we all need to take stock of the pace of our lives. Because there's so much that we miss out on because we've traded one thing for another. And there's some of you in this room today that you would say, man, I don't know how I'm going to keep up this pace for the next year. I don't know how in the world I talk myself into that commitment. I don't know how I'm going to be able to pay for. My prayer is that you set aside your normal, the world's normal, our society's normal, and look at not just the teachings of Jesus, but the way of Jesus' life. Because it's weird, but it'll set you free. And the most important thing we can do is take stock of the health of our souls. As I get older and interact with people that have health problems, you kind of are more aware of like what's in store for you in the future. Maybe you can relate. You're taking care of somebody that's older than you. And there was a time in your life where you felt invincible, that you could do whatever and work whatever and endure whatever the thing is. But at some point in your life, that is not going to be your reality. And there are a whole lot of us of a certain age and below that are speeding towards that moment where you may not make the decision to be slowed down, and God or somebody else, some other outside force will make it for you. If you've ever been in that situation, sometimes it's painful, but it's a gift. Because all of us need to evaluate the speed at which we are living.